Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is, wherever you are, welcome to the Good Values Podcast. In this episode, I speak to someone who I met almost a decade ago. It might even be a decade ago, I'm not sure. A good several years ago, let's put it that way. Very, very nice guy, very talented, and I thought it'd be interesting to introduce onto the episode a filmmaker. Now, this is a filmmaker in the sense of being a writer, director, producer, editor, and an actor. Now, in the process of me editing this episode, I realized that there was so much good conversation and content to share that I'd really like to split it into two episodes. So this time it's going to be part two, and this is me talking to the lovely and talented Andy Pearson. Do your films have a color palette? Do you try to inject certain color grading into your films so that you have, say, the green tint, or you should make sure things have pink, or you want to have certain warmth or cool tones or anything like that?
I think I think it's a film to film basis. I don't have my own style. I
Mm,
don't. Well, I have my own style, but I don't have like this is my palette.
yeah.
I think it's something I'd like to get better at. Not
Mm,
again. I'm kind of thinking of three things. I definitely would always do it film by film because I think that's a character. It's a character in the film, the way a film looks.
mm,
And so I don't want to go, oh, I only do it this style, and so all my films need to look the same. So it would always be film by film. Um, I think that it's something I need to get better at, like as in like it's that's a pre-production thing. In color grade you can do great things, but when you haven't got a budget, you can't really go, well, this all the characters in this scene are going to wear green because it's about envy, and you can't do any of those things because you can't go out and make sure you buy all those green things. So
yeah.
you kind of have to work within the environment that you're in. I do like, for things that I write, I have a tendency to lean into that kind of like warm yellow tones
Mm,
with browns and stuff like that. So I feel like when I've done my 10th film, I'll be able to look back and go, okay, that's my style. I obviously like
uh,
that kind of,
yeah.
and I don't know if it's because of growing up on like those that 70s. I didn't grow up in the 70s, but when I grew up, I watched a lot of like those kind of like 70s Hollywood films, that like Easy Rider, and a lot of those
Mm,
have like those yellow kind of film look, and I
yeah.
like that look. I'm not a big fan of what. It's not. I'm not a big fan of the teal and orange, which is really popular at the moment.
Mm,
But I have a problem with it because every film looks. I
yeah.
don't like it when you kind of go, oh, you've shot it the same as every other film. You've caught it. It's a film made by people who've studied film. Back to an earlier question. It's that thing of ruining the rules ruining filmmaking because
Mm,
everyone goes, "Oh, I know how to make a film because I know all of the rules." You go, "Yeah, but where's you in
yeah.
this film?
Yeah.
You're an artist, aren't you? If all you've done is like made sure you framed it correctly, colored it correctly,
Mm,
made sure that the actors emoted in the like everything was the rules that you've read in the book. You've read,
yeah.
Sid Field's book. You've read like Save the Cat. You've done all those things, but where are you? Where are
Yeah.
you in this film? Where is your emotion? Where's your character? Where's your, and I mean your character as a director or as a
Yeah.
filmmaker. Where is you? Because that's the beauty of a film.
Mm,
And when you see, I've seen great films that I've gone, this is a great film, but I'm so taken out of it because it's shot so like every other film, really
yeah.
digital, really crisp,
Mm,
um, and yeah, and this kind of like orange and teal look to it,
mm,
and I just kind of go, kind of bit boring again because I just feel like it's that thing, and it feels very judgmental to be that way because I still respect them as a filmmaker and still think that they've got stuff, but it's that thing where you kind of go, I don't know. It feels like there's less thought in the emotion. There's lots of
yeah.
thought of the art isn't an equation.
Mm,
It's not. You can't work it out. You have to feel it.
yeah.
That's why someone like Eggers or like Sophia Coppola
Mm,
or Wes Anderson,
mm,
their films are extremely. They know what they're shooting. They know it frame by frame. Like
mm,
Edgar Wright. There's not a frame in his film that he's making up on the day. He knows everything that's happening in that film, but they are in the film. You don't look at that film and
mm,
go, "Oh, they've done that color and they've done that choice and they've made this and it looks like that." You can almost tell right away that it's their film because they're in it.
mm,
Even if the film's massively different,
yeah.
you can still see that it's their film because they're in it. That visually they're in the film. It's their film.
I was going to bring up Edgar Wright earlier when you were mentioning um, if a film is it's shot well, but it doesn't have this, you won't like it. I was going to say I've got an exception to that because I recommended an Edgar Wright film that I didn't like the characters, didn't like the script, didn't like the story. I didn't really like the actors and how they did it, but I loved the editing. And I recommended the film, and my brother watched it, and he was just like, "That film wasn't good." And I was like, "It's not a good film, but the
What
editing's
film was it?
amazing." Um, Baby Driver. It was just
Oh, yeah,
have you seen it?
yeah. It's not good.
It's not a good film, but the
No,
editing is just amazing throughout the
it's
film.
I watched it again recently because
Did you?
I surprisingly really really loved Last Night in Soho. Lots of
Last
different things
night,
there.
so I've not seen that
Yeah,
yet.
I really enjoyed it. I didn't. I'd heard bad things about it,
Yeah, me too.
and so I kind of went into it going, "Oh, I love Edgar Wright," but I wasn't a fan of Baby Driver because I felt like it was a lot of style and no substance, and I
Mm,
felt like it was a lot of nostalgia porn, where it's that thing of like more about what it's trying to be rather than it being its own thing.
yeah,
I thought some of it was great, but some of it just felt like a lot of towards the end, a lot of like coincidence of like, why is this person here now? Why is that? There's a lot of that
yeah.
going on at the end that really annoyed me. So I went, yeah,
Sorry.
but I really enjoyed Last Night in Soho. I really, I'm not sure if it'd be for you or for why people didn't like it,
Mm,
but I mean, I had issues with certain bits in it, but overall, I really like. There's a bit at the very beginning of the film. It's shot in this very basic way, like almost like he's gone back to space, and you're like, this is very strange. Doesn't feel like an Edgar Wright film. It feels like it is, and it
yeah.
feels like it's very, of course, it then goes to the 70s, like the 60s stuff, and you
Mm,
go, oh, this exists
oh,
specifically so that you can juxtaposition it to this.
yeah.
That's why it exists that way,
Oh,
and then
lovely.
that all kind of makes sense more as the film goes along. And
About the contrast. Oh, I like it. Before I get to these last three questions, I want to ask you because I'm such a big fan of this show. I wanted to know if you've seen it and if you like it because I think it is like watching movies, and that's Better Call Saul. Have you watched it?
yes, I haven't watched the new series yet because
Yeah.
I haven't got Netflix at the moment, but I'm going to be getting it once it's finished. I'm
Mm.
going to get Netflix just so I can watch it again. But yeah, I think it's better than Breaking Bad.
Oh, me too. Me too.
I think it's weird because I really enjoyed Breaking Bad. I think there was
Mm.
some bits that were a little bit obvious, and it do TV things every now and again. It would throw you
Mm.
because you're like, what? Why is this? Why is this doing a TV thing?
Yeah.
But Better Call Saul is just solid all the way through, and
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Bob Odenkirk anyway because I'm a big Mr. Show fan.
Mr.
So
Show. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it broke my heart on Breaking Bad when Gus straightened his tie with half of a face. I just kind of
oh
checked me
yeah.
out at that point. I just thought, what am I watching? What are you doing, guys? So yeah, no, I had to ask you just because I love and I eat up the cinematography from that. I love all the camera angles and the colors. I just think it's a beautiful, well considered, well composed show.
I've just watched The Bear. You should give that a go. It's really good.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
Yeah,
The
it's
bear.
it's brand new. It's got like eight episodes, one season. It's about a guy who's like a really accomplished chef in New York. None of this exposition happens. It throws you right into it.
Yeah.
But his brother has passed away, and he's taking over his family's restaurant, which is called The Beef
Mm,
in Chicago. So it's very Chicago. It's all very kind of like everyone calling each other cousins. Hey cousin, hey cousin. It's like that. But it feels very filmic, and
mm,
it's really locking into the heat of a of a restaurant, like of a cheat of a failing restaurant. But it's very shouty, and sometimes I'm like, oh, is this shouty good or shouty just let? Is this a bunch of people who just come right out of like a theatre
Yeah,
troupe and have just gone like doing their best monologues they can do? But I
yeah.
really enjoyed it, and I liked the story, and it didn't hold my hand or anything, and kind of like told you found things out slowly,
Mm.
and it's like I'm excited for. I'm hoping it gets a new series because it ends in a way that makes you want to watch the new series. But
I've heard of it, but yeah, you've just reminded me because it was a while ago. Well, I think it was a couple of weeks ago that a couple of comedians on a podcast mentioned it, and they watch shows intermittently. So, yeah,
which
uh,
comedians?
it was. Well, it's one comedian, one writer. It's Greg Fitzsimmons
Oh, okay, yeah.
um, and I can't remember his co-host, but it's Sunday Papers. If you've not seen the podcast, very
I've not
funny.
seen it. I'll check that out. Yeah, because I do know. I know those guys. I watch a lot. I play video games in the evening and just put on podcasts and stuff. But
Mm,
I put it on. I've got a projector and a TV, so I've got a projector where I'm playing my video games and a TV with a video in case they show
nice.
something I want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see. But I thought when you said it, have you heard of a podcast called "We May Be Drunk"?
yeah, yes.
Yeah,
With
so
Mark
I
Normand
watched
and
with Mark Norman and Sam Morrell.
Sam
I
Morril,
watched that, and they always do Rex at the end. So
yeah.
I thought it might have been a Rex because they mentioned the bear.
Did they? No,
Yeah.
I need to watch more of We Might Be Drunk. I think I've only seen two episodes, the Bill Burr one, and I can't remember who the other one was. But anyway, yeah, so I'll have to watch more of those because I love both of those guys.
Because
But
they forget what they say and repeat things a lot on it.
yeah,
But I enjoy.
yeah,
It feels like I always want. I don't really drink, but I always want to get a drink and just. It feels like a nice sit down and have a drink. And they should
yeah,
actually say what the drink is on the episode, so you can make it yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they did on the Bill Burr one. They started to mention what it was because he doesn't drink as much. But yeah, I haven't watched enough episodes to see the tropes that they fall into, I think.
Yeah. But it's
Um,
good. I enjoy it.
The only other thing that I wanted to say, which I haven't said, which I might as well, is because when I asked you about inspiration, I tried to ask you, but the video had broken up and you were giving me an answer and I thought you'd stopped. So I asked you this question and then
Okay.
you came back and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even hear what you said then. What I asked you was, have you seen a 1960s French film called Playtime? I think it's
I have not.
1967.
I will note it down though.
That has inspired me, and I'm going to make an art film because of Playtime, and I'm going to be the only actor in it because that's the reason I've got this beard and this stupid long hair,
Okay.
because
Oh,
I'm going to have my hair comes down to about there, and I'm going to basically cut it progressively and cut my beard to play different characters in different costumes to try and emulate some of the atmosphere of Playtime because I love that film and it's
okay.
mesmerizingly strange. There was another film after it by the same person, which is not as good, but the introduction is fantastic, and it's called Traffic. And Traffic has some amazing sequences, but as a film, it's not very good. Whereas Playtime, I think, is a very good film.
Okay.
Traffic
No,
is
no, I'll
not.
definitely give it a go. It makes me mad. There's two films that I've got that I'm
Hmm.
desperate to watch, and I started watching one the other day. But I've got one of those VR headsets
Oh yeah,
because I need it for my business because I'm trying to like work out how to do 360 videos and stuff.
nice.
Um, but it has virtual cinemas in it, and they're
Mm,
amazing. Where you can actually watch a cinema. So like, there's literally you can look down and like when there's a bright bit on the screen,
yeah.
it lights up the chairs in the front row
Oh
and stuff.
really?
So it's really cool. I mean, the people are pretty ropey looking because they're like just hands and floating heads and stuff. But when you're not paying attention to them, it's quite
Yeah.
cool to see. I actually watched uh, everything all at no
Everything everywhere all at
all
once.
at once, which is
Yeah,
also amazing.
yeah, I love that.
Um, but I started watching. Well, I can't think of the name. Fitz Fitzcarraldo. Fitzcarraldo, Burnham Hogg. And I was like, this is amazing, but then I got a headache from being in the VR, so I had to turn it off. So, and then the other one is Come See, which is a horror, like a Polish film about the war,
Oh, I've heard
which
that.
looks amazing, and I just haven't sat down. I've not had the moments recently where I feel like I can focus.
Yeah,
Like when you watch a film, I need to sit and go, I'm
yeah,
doing this.
yeah,
So those are two sort of films, but now Playtime's now been put on the list of things that I need to do as well.
yeah. Question that I ask everyone every episode, so you will have heard me ask in the podcast that you watched. What is the most beautiful thing you've seen today?
The most beautiful thing. Well, I've been inside most of today, so it's been a lot of computer stuff. Most beautiful things that I saw today. What was the most beautiful thing? What was editing stuff? I saw there was I was editing a farmer being given a reproduction Neolithic axe, and that's quite beautiful. So that's probably the most beautiful thing
Wow.
to see. That I'll give you two answers, because one answer, that's the most beautiful thing. Like I saw it because it was like, yeah, it's like a Neolithic, like, so the thing I've been filming has been a dig where people are near my house, where
Mm.
there's lots of Neolithic axes were built in that area, and it's so impressive because a lot of the axes can be found in Yorkshire, can be found down south, because
Wow.
somehow, with no transportation, they were still traveling and trading in some way. That's just amazing. But somebody makes these axes in the traditional way, which is getting these pieces of scree, which is a stone, and then you break it off and chip it off, and then they get it to a nice smooth area, and then they polish it, and it
Mm.
has these massive, really sharp edges, and they polish them, and there's loads of history behind it. It's beautiful, but they
Mm.
made a replica one, and it's pretty cool to see. And then the other one was you know what? It's funny. I can't remember the brand name now. I'm trying to get the brand name, but I was looking up audio recorders, and I saw one that I liked the look of, and I was like, oh, that's on the wish list for the next thing to
Yeah.
buy. And so as a filmmaker, you sometimes find beauty in equipment that would make
Yeah.
filmmaking easier. You're like, oh, that's a beautiful thing. I
No, I
remember seeing the
appreciate
boat.
that.
Yeah, I seen the Bolex for the first time when even though the Bolex is a horrible camera to film with, which is what we shot British Winters with, which was
Yeah.
a digital Bolex, which was a Kickstarter project by these people passionate to make a digital camera that shot like film, like 16
Mm.
mil film. And they did, but it looks like an old cine camera. So when I first saw that, I was like, oh, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm.
Horrible to film with, though.
No, that's a fantastic answer because there's no way anyone else gives anything like that as an answer. And I
Mm.
think there's a pressure on people when I ask that question to find something with a specific kind of ephemeral quality to it, which I appreciate you being, kind of on the level of an editor and sort of saying, I see beauty in this and I've seen
Mm.
beauty in that, because that's lovely as well. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And the last question, there's the last two questions in one. And it's again something which I ask artists, but with you being a writer, I'm going to ask you about your own writing and what do you like and what don't you like about your own writing?
Well, the easy answer is I'm dyslexic. So I don't like that I'm dyslexic when I'm writing, because it makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
Dyslexia doesn't stop you from being creative. It doesn't stop you from being able to write well, but it will make you have to prove things to death, because the biggest problem with trying to proofread, and even if you go and buy a book off a shelf right now, you will find typos on it, because when we read, we kind of fill in a lot of the blanks, and so
Yeah.
it's very hard to find typos. And if you're dyslexic, it's extremely hard to find typos.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest thing to say, because that's just a practical part
Mm.
of writing. What's the thing? I think it's weird because I want to say that, yeah, I think it's a good question. That's a really good question, because a part of me thinks about um, like completing things. But that's more kind of, again, it's like the idea of, like, I have a tendency of, I've got a lot of things started, but trying to make sure you get them finished and sitting down and dedicating the time to thing.
Yeah.
For the stylistic writing style, what do I dislike the most? I think I don't know if I dislike this most, because I think it might be a bit. No, I do dislike it, but I also think that it might be a style that I write in, and that has to be the way it has to be, because that's who I am. But I overthink, I over-explain, so sometimes I can, even within writing, especially within the novel for British Winters,
Mm.
there was a lot of going down rabbit holes, like,
Mm.
because the character's mind was like that, so it was okay to kind of, like, he would mention one thing and then just go off on a tangent on somewhere else, which is what I do.
Yeah.
Um, and I sometimes do that in writing now, where I'll get uh, one thought will lead to 10 thoughts,
Mm.
and I'll explore that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I probably would like to get better at, and
Can be a
be,
hindrance.
yeah, not lose the stylisticness, like, because I like it stylistically, but
Mm.
like, um, just because again, the problem with that is, it's interesting in the moment because you're
Mm.
thinking it. But that doesn't mean that it will be interesting in 10 minutes when you
Yeah.
reread it. You're like, oh wait, actually, this thing that I thought was so, amazing and like, like no one's ever thought this before, and then you read it back and it's like, oh, women are two species. No, like sorry, that was a callback to something that wasn't in the podcast. Yeah, no, like having a thought that yeah, in the moment you can feel really, like a genius for a second, and then you go back and you realize you just rambled for 20 minutes.
It's just inefficient when it comes to writing.
Inefficient storytelling is what you've done. Yeah. So that's what I would say, yeah.
But yeah, so you find it easier to say what you don't like. What is it you do like about your own writing? Which is not a criticism, by the way. That's something which I've noticed with artists is they find it very easy to say, I don't like this. This is a problem. Whereas to say, this is what's good about my work. It can be tricky, but
I'm going to say that it's honest in the sense that I do not flinch away from stuff that I already know. Like, so within the film that I've just written, there is a moment where a male character tries to kiss a female character because he thinks they're having a moment and he's misread it. And within it, later on in the film, he points out how stupid this was, and he refers to it like, someone did something nice, and I kind of did a Me Too moment. The reason why I've done that is because it's in the zeitgeist. That's what would happen, and if I was to remove those things, I'm trying to ignore what's going on, and I don't believe in like empirical right or empirical wrong. I think that there is this kind of grey area, and we live in these grey areas, and so I want to write characters in these grey areas that make mistakes, that do things that are not right. And I think a lot of writers these days would worry. Either they would be like, they would come from a point of view of like, hey, I'm going to write this because it's the way people are, or they come from a point of view of like, oh, I don't want to offend people. And I think both of those things are rubbish.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be trying to offend people, but you should also not be so sensitive yourself as a writer. And so, because you become dishonest, become dishonest as a writer. I want to write about real people who have real experiences and have real emotions and real feelings and make real mistakes, because that's interesting. Yeah. Writing perfect people who know the right thing to do always is not interesting. And it's also not interesting to have a film that corrects that. Like, if you have somebody of bad behavior, you don't need to have a moment in a film. I mean, particularly in this film, I do have a moment where I correct that, but it's because they're having a conversation about that very thing, But you don't need... The audience knows it's wrong. You don't need the character to learn that it's wrong.
Yeah.
You need to know whether that character... again, it's that thing about like... I think sometimes people forget what the film's saying and confuse it with what the characters are doing. I'm a big fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I've not seen that,
Have you not seen it? No. What's funny is I'm listening to the podcast right now where they're going through the episodes, and I genuinely love Rob McElhenney who wrote it and came up with the idea, because he's lovely. As a person, the things he talks about, he's really funny, but like he's got a really interesting history. Like he went to university but didn't get enrolled, so he basically went through university and he only got found out when he was cast as the lead in a play, and they were like, "Wait, we need to have your documentation." He's like, "Okay, I'm out." Just genius. But the concept of but what I was going to say was that they talk about how the first series is kind of a hard watch for him now, and I've just tried to I've rewatching it with him, and I'm like, it is true. I loved the first series when I first watched it, but it's very rough, it's very ready, and I don't know if they're that good of a writer. As like later series, they become so really really proficient at what they're doing, but that can all get cut out. What I was going to say was that the story is about the comedy is these are terrible people. It's like, let's take Seinfeld, where these are bad people, and amplify it. Yeah. Like, they argue with each other. It's all funny, and they're idiots. And so you like them and hate them at the same time. But everything's about them saying the wrong thing or not understanding something and arguing about it. 90% of the episodes are two of them. Like, they had one that was about buying a gun, and two of them become like guns need to be banned, and two of them become guns or everything. It ends up being an argument about that, about gun control.
Yeah.
And within that, they make really good points of the irony and the hypocrisy in both sides of those arguments, which is great.
Yeah.
But some people would watch that and go, "Oh, these people are terrible. We shouldn't have this on TV." And you're like, no, they know they're terrible.
Yeah.
That's not what the show's doing. The show isn't doing that. The characters are doing that.
Yeah.
You're completely judging the show based on the characters in the show. That's a problem for me, because I go, then we need to have a director who's moral, who then writes characters who are moral, or if they're not moral, they learn how to be moral, or they get their comeuppance at the end.
Yeah.
And that's the you know, when I was a kid, there was that thing of like every film had to have the happy ending, so you always knew the end of the film, and that became problematic. The modern conundrum is that everyone feels like if someone does something bad, at some point the film needs to correct this. In fact, if you don't mind me having explained something that really bugged me,
No, please.
you can cut this out or you can leave it in. I hope that I say it in the right way, because I'm extremely
passionate about this.
Well, I'm passionate about the film. So I watched. There's a TV show. It wasn't a great TV show, but I kind of got locked into it. And sometimes I'm one of those people, like I've got OCD with stories sometimes. Completionist. Where like even I watched all of Spartacus, Blood on the Sands.
Right.
Because a mutual friend of ours told me to watch it because he said it was good, and I hated it from the moment I put it on till the last episode. But I watched the whole thing because I felt like I've got to be able to understand this at some point. But it was terrible, and I don't know why anybody likes that show. So there was a TV show, The Umbrella Academy. Did you hear about that? It was on Netflix.
No.
It's based on a comic book, and I watched the first series, and it kind of got me in because there's a character in it that's a monkey. But it talks. It talks, and it walks around. It wears clothes. Never explained, and I loved that. For a second, I was like, "Oh, we've got to the point now where everyone's so used to comic books that you can put a character in and not care that people go like, wait, that's a talking monkey. Like, why is that a talking monkey?" And that kind of hooked me a little bit, and then I watched all of it. But Elliot Page is in it. But Elliot Page was started off, hadn't transitioned in the first two series. So when the third series came out, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting, because obviously they're going to have them be Elliot Page, because they're now not going to be playing female characters anymore because they're not female. And I thought that's really interesting. I wonder how they'll tackle it, because it's quite an unusual show and it's very satirical and stuff like that. So I wondered how they were going to tackle it. So I watched the first episode, and I was so disappointed of how heavy-handed they dealt with it. They had a moment where he goes and has his hair cut, and then they come back, and then someone refers to them as the character's female name, and they correct them, and they go, "What do you mean?" And then they go, "Is this a problem?" And there's this kind of weird moment of like, and they go, "No, it's not a problem." And then there's another moment where she has a full conversation with he has a full conversation with somebody about it and why it. And I was like, this would have been so much better if you'd have just gone to the table and they would go like, "Oh, you've got your hair," or they'd have gone to someone and they were like, "Yeah, I'm a man.
Yeah.
Is that okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's fine. Move on."
Yeah.
Because that would have been so much more progressive in my mind.
Yeah.
To be like, because that's how we should deal with it in life. Life, we shouldn't be like, "You're what? Explain it to me a bit more. How's it going? And how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it now?" And I'm not saying don't be emotional and allow, if you've got a friend who transitions, be emotional and be there for them.
Yeah.
But in a day-to-day thing, you should be like, "Oh, I didn't know that about you. Crack on.
Yeah,
I'm now going to use male pronouns.
Yeah.
If I've known you my entire life, I might slip up because you have muscle memory in your mouth.
Yeah.
Please forgive me those moments. Know that there's no malice in those moments. But from now on, let's move on. You are now this person. I'm not going to treat you any differently than I treated you before.
Yeah.
Let's move on." And I wanted to do that. And I just felt that was so an example of like, we need to address this.
Yeah.
But let's be as compassionate. Let's make this a moment for the audience. And I was like, I think that's I think
condescending a
that,
bit, really.
yeah, it condescends to me, and I'm obviously Elliot Page wanted it to be that way, so that's their wish, and that's great. So they don't feel like it's condescending to them.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was condescending to the trans community, in my opinion. But again, I'm
I
not
wonder.
trans.
Yeah.
But I just felt like I would imagine that 90% of the trans community just want to be the the gender they have now assigned to, and
Yeah.
just want to get on with their lives and live
Yeah.
their lives day to day. 90% of them are not actors, they're not famous, they're not celebrities.
No.
You know, they're waiters, plumbers,
Yeah.
doctors. And my doctor in when I used to live in Rutland was a transgender woman.
Yeah.
Way before Kylie Jenner. Is it Kylie Jenner? No,
Caitlin, isn't it?
Caitlyn. Is it
Yeah.
Caitlyn? Caitlyn Jenner.
I think so.
I hate the Kardashians, so I don't really pay attention to their names. But way before
Love the Jenners.
they put, you know, like, it's like, oh, I did that South Park thing of like, I more remember that you killed someone with your car.
Yeah, exactly. I remember. A woman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so it's
Yeah.
like, you know, that they're the people that I care about. Those people, that the real people who are out there, and I just felt like that was a disservice to them.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to make sure that the audience wasn't going to, like, you didn't want, they were worried about internet pushback, I would assume.
Yeah.
So they wanted to be like, we're going to give this a moment, and going to keep, and then through the whole episode they kept coming back to it. Then there was 3 separate conversations about the person transitioning into male, and I just thought that was so heavy-handed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of Elliot Page, and always loved you because I love Juno and I love a lot of the films that he's been in. But I can only imagine, and I've not seen The Umbrella Academy, so I could be way off. I can only imagine that Elliot Page's perception of the public is skewed by the internet trolls and the pushback against the transgender community, because it's so absurd when you hear it. You just think, what is the problem? I mean, granted, I make the mistake because I have a friend or a former friend, sadly, who is the pronouns are they, them, and I always struggled getting they, them correct. And I tried to use a device in my head to make sure that I saw them as a they, them, instead of as any specific pronoun, male or female. But they were very understanding, because they said that not only is it, you know, it's not he or she, basically. So they understood that it makes it more difficult to almost assign a plural to a singular. But that's not a big deal as far as accepting that's who the person is. It's just tricky because of how ingrained it is to assign someone with a singular pronoun as what we consider to be a plural. But they, them isn't a plural necessarily, because you could say someone's at the door and you could say, what do they want?
Yeah.
You know, so it's they, them could be singular. But it's just a weird thing for you to
I think that yeah, I mean, not to get too big, but I think the biggest problem is just people. We need to live in a world where people know intent. That's my big thing. Is just like intent is important. Absolutely. Like, you can't say that words matter, but intent matters more. Absolutely. Like, if you should know the difference between a friend getting a pronoun wrong or saying the name wrong.
Yeah.
And being devastated that they have done. And somebody online being genuinely mean and malicious and calling you by the wrong pronoun because they want to, because they don't believe your emotions and they don't believe in your experience.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And I think that is a problem on the internet with when we start going. And I also don't like that casual, well, just look it up on eBay. Oh, no, I'm sorry, on eBay. My brain's wrong today. Look it up on Google, like, just do it. Like, it's that kind of really horrible, dismissive attitude of like, you need to learn the new way straight away. And you were like, well, you don't want me to look on Google because I can end up anywhere on Google.
I found Breitbart.
Yeah, apparently you're not. You're not what you say you are. I've learned lots on Google. So so it's the idea of like, I don't like the dismissiveness and I understand, because again, anybody who thinks that they like us, like, oh, you should get offended because I get the wrong pronoun. It's like, think of anything in your life, like I'm trying to give an example of something like people would call, I'm called Andrew, so people would call me Andy Pandy. it's not a big thing, but when it's the first thing that people say to you a lot,
Yeah.
it starts grating on you a little bit. So imagine that amplified by people continuously getting you wrong pronouns all the time. I can understand why even in an innocent situation, someone would go, oh, because it's happening a lot of time. That's understandable, and I have no problem with that. But I think understanding intent and having both sides having empathy. Like if you are a trans person, having empathy for people learning new ways and for struggling to remember things, because a lot of things are muscle memory. Like I was calling a guy who's called Barry. I was called sorry, he was called Brian. I called him Barry for 2 weeks. Worked out. Then I was told that he's called Brian, and I still have to correct myself. And that was just 2 weeks of calling him the wrong name. That name's still in my mouth. So imagine if you've known someone your entire life. And I think with a non-binary, it is more difficult in the sense of, I think if someone transitions into a different gender, it's easier to go to drop on one side.
Yeah.
But if you don't use they if you're not really using they in your day-to-day vernacular, then you're not going, oh, she, you can't, you go they. It's a very difficult one to go in. So I think that understanding on both sides. Anyway, we're going to run out of another meeting.
Yeah, benefit of the doubt is the lesson, really. Give people the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of each episode, I always ask the guest, is there any social media that you'd like to direct the audience to?
Yes, so you can follow Wild Kindness Films on Instagram, which I would hope Simon will put up a little logo somewhere here if I send in the links. I've also got a Facebook page, and the main place to look at any videos or films, trailers, would be on the YouTube. So that's the Wild Kindness Film Productions YouTube page, which you'll see some music videos. The short that I did with Rocky, 7 Sharp, the whole film is on there, so you can watch that.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. If you ever have anything you want to promote, I'd love to have you back on again. It's been a great conversation, and I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I apologize for all the editing you've got to do now, but thank you for having me on. I have followed the channel. It's really great what you're doing. I like it. There needs to be more. I think there's a lot of YouTubers out there that, to get clicks and to get money, they're covering the big stuff, which is the big movies, your Marvels and all of that nonsense. And there needs to be more people saying you're not looking here, so look here. And that's the vibe that I'm getting from these videos, is there is a bunch of artists and art that you don't know about that you might be interested in. I think that's really important.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'll see you soon.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that is part 2 done. Now, I hope you enjoyed that part of the conversation. I thought it was really interesting because there are lots of overlaps between making artwork and being a filmmaker. Several considerations. I mean, he's brought up colour palettes himself without me prompting it. It's a similar consideration as when you're a painter or anyone who works with colour in art. That's something you have to consider. Composition, storytelling, all of these things factor into art making almost equally as it would to a filmmaker, because you have to show something to an audience which they understand or they can interpret in their own way. And that's what a filmmaker does. I mean, to greater or lesser extents, artists and filmmakers do that. And I have preferences that I'd like to discuss with Andy. Now, he's one of these people who I wish I could have had a longer conversation with him. But in absolute truth, this is, each episode of the podcast is around 40 minutes long. We had 3 40-minute meetings. And that's why it was so hard to try to edit this down to one episode. And I just didn't have the heart to cut out a lot of the conversation that you've just seen now. So I don't know. I'd like to have Andy on again. I don't know his availability. I'm going to hopefully speak to him again before too long. But what a lovely person and what an honest conversation. I really appreciated him being on. And I hope you support all of the social media links that he mentioned. I'll leave them in the description below. Please check them out and support his productions. He really deserves it. He's a very kind and talented person. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, share it with any friends and family. I want to thank you all for watching, and for the people who leave comments all the time, it means the world to me. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.